There is a small wooden box on my desk. The wood is dark, the corners are scratched, and across the top, burned into the grain with what looks like an old soldering iron, is a single word: Unsolved. Inside the box are 6 folders, 6 paper folders, each tied with brown string, each containing the photographs and the field notes and the news clippings and the sealed police reports of a single robbery. And what those 6 folders have in common is not the amount stolen, although the amounts are obscene. It is not the ingenuity, although the ingenuity is sometimes breathtaking. What those 6 folders have in common is that the people who committed these crimes are still smiling. Somewhere in this world, 6 different men, or what is left of them after time and silence, are still smiling. Because they got away with it, and you have never heard of most of them. I am Mortimer Quill, and welcome to the archive. Tonight we are not telling stories about criminals who failed. Hollywood has told you those stories. Hollywood loves heists that fail. The flawed mastermind, the double cross, the flashing red light at the last second, the handcuffs, roll credits. That is the version Hollywood sells you because it is the version that lets you sleep at night. You walk out of the cinema and you tell yourself that the world is just, that the police catch the criminals, that the money goes back, that the painting hangs again on the wall, that the diamond returns to the velvet pillow under the glass. You tell yourself this and you go to bed, and you sleep. Real life loves heists that succeed. Real life is not interested in your sleep. Real life is interested in the gap between what the police know and what the police can prove in a court of law. And that gap, my friend, is wide enough to drive a Brinks truck through. Sideways, with the sirens off. Tonight I am going to open this box. I am going to take out the folders one at a time. I am going to walk you through 6 robberies. 6 robberies that worked. 6 robberies where the criminals got the prize, and the police got the headlines, and the public got, eventually, nothing. The cases are technically closed in some instances. In others, they remain open, the file growing thinner by the year as the witnesses die and the evidence yellows. In one case, a famous museum still leaves the picture frames hanging on the wall, empty, like dental sockets after a punch, waiting for paintings that have not come home in 35 years. What you will learn tonight is not how to commit a robbery. I am not in the business of education by crime. What you will learn tonight is something stranger and, in its way, more disturbing. You will learn that the perfect crime is not the crime that vanishes without a trace. The perfect crime is the crime that leaves 1,000 traces, and not one of them is admissible in court. The perfect crime is the one where everybody knows who did it. The police know, the neighbors know, the man at the corner cafe knows, and nothing happens. Nothing can happen, because knowledge and proof are different animals, and they do not breed. Sit down, pour something. The box is open. The first folder is the thickest. The string has been retied many times because investigators have opened and closed this folder for more than 2 decades. Across the front, in the small, precise handwriting of an Antwerp detective who is now retired, are 3 words: Notarbartolo, February 2003. Inside that folder is a story that begins with a man eating a sandwich in a forest, ends with a sandwich crumb on a piece of paper, and contains, in the middle, the largest diamond robbery the world had ever seen. Antwerp, Belgium, the Diamond District. 4 city blocks. More than 80% of the world's rough diamonds pass through these blocks every year. The walking pavement of those 4 streets is, in any commercial sense, the most expensive square footage on Earth. And in the heart of those 4 blocks stands a building called the Antwerp World Diamond Center. Inside the basement of that building, 2 floors below the street, sits a vault. The vault has 10 layers of security. It has a key lock with 100 million possible combinations. It has a combination dial. It has a magnetic seal that, when the door is closed, registers a signal back to the security room. It has a heat sensor that detects body warmth. It has a motion sensor that detects movement. It has a Doppler radar. It has light sensors. It has security cameras. And it has a guard who comes by every hour to make sure the cameras have not blinked. The diamond merchants who rented safe deposit boxes in this vault paid for the privilege. They paid because they were told, and they believed, that nothing on earth could open this vault except the key, the combination, and the careful permission of the building. In the year 2000, an Italian man named Leonardo with access to the vault. The receptionist gave him paperwork. He filled it out. The paperwork was checked. The check came back clean. Leonardo Notarbartolo was indeed a registered diamond merchant in Italy. He had a small business. He had no criminal record. He paid his deposit in cash. He was given a small office on an upper floor. He was given a safe deposit box in the vault. He was given the keys. He shook hands. He left. For the next 2 years, Leonardo Notarbartolo came and went from the Diamond Center like any other tenant. He nodded to the security guard. He waved to the receptionist. He took the elevator down to the vault. He opened his safe deposit box. He looked at his diamonds. He closed his box. He went back upstairs. He had lunch at the cafe across the street. He spoke to other dealers about the price of stones. He played the part of a man whose entire life was the slow, patient buying and selling of small, bright objects. And while he played that part, he was photographing every inch of the vault. He photographed the keypad. He photographed the lock. He photographed the placement of the heat sensor. He photographed the angle of the camera in the corner. He photographed the way the magnetic seal connected. He photographed the screws on the door. He photographed everything. He photographed it with a camera hidden in a button on his coat. He photographed it for 2 years. And then he went home and he gave his photographs to a small group of men who, in the careful, almost archaeological language of the Antwerp Diamond Squad, were known as the School of Turin. The School of Turin was not a school. It was 4 men, a locksmith, an electronics expert, an alarm specialist, and a man named Speedy who could pick any pocket in Europe in less than 4 seconds. They studied the photographs. They built, in a warehouse somewhere outside Turin, a full-scale replica of the Antwerp Diamond Center vault. And on that replica, for many months, they practiced. They learned that the heat sensor could be defeated by a thin sheet of polystyrene foam, sprayed with hairspray to neutralize the static. They learned that the magnetic seal could be defeated by sliding a thin metal plate behind the door, holding the magnetic signal in place even while the door swung open. They learned that the light sensor could be covered with black tape. They learned that the motion sensor could be tricked by sliding the body very, very slowly past it, slower than the sensor's threshold. They learned the camera angles. They learned the guard's schedule. They learned everything. On the weekend of February 15, 2003, Leonardo Notarbartolo and his team entered the Antwerp Diamond Center. They did it on a Saturday night. The building was closed. The diamond merchants had gone home. The guards were at their posts. Notarbartolo had a key to the building because he was a tenant. He had a key to the vault floor because he was a tenant. He had access to his own safe deposit box because he was a tenant. Everything that he had done, up to the moment he stepped into the vault, was completely legal. And then, in the dark of that vault, with the cameras blinded, the heat sensor fooled, the magnetic seal held in place, the motion sensor frozen by the sheer slowness of his movements, Leonardo Notarbartolo and his team opened 109 of the 189 safe deposit boxes in that vault. They did it in less than 5 hours. They emptied the boxes into duffel bags. They closed the boxes again, so that the next morning the boxes would look untouched. They walked out of the vault. They walked out of the building. They drove away. The estimated value of what they took has never been precisely determined. The number that the diamond industry whispers, the number that appears in the insurance filings, the number that the Antwerp police carved into their wall, is $100 million. Some say it was more. Some say it was 3 times that. The truth is that diamond merchants do not always declare every stone in their box, because not every stone in every box has paperwork. So the real number, the true number, is in the hands of men who will not say. Now, here is the part the movies do not tell you. Leonardo Notarbartolo got caught. He got caught because of a sandwich. Here is what happened. After the robbery, the team drove from Antwerp toward the French border. They were tired. They were on a high. They had, in the trunk of the car, more wealth than most small countries hold in foreign reserves. And one of the men in the car, a man whose name has never been entered into any court document because the case against him collapsed, was hungry. They stopped near a wooded area off a small Belgian road. They got out of the car. They ate sandwiches, salami sandwiches. And before they got back into the car, in a moment of extraordinary stupidity that has haunted the diamond world for 20 years, they decided that they should not leave their trash in the car. So they walked into the woods. And they threw the wrappers and the napkins and the half-eaten crusts into the brush. They drove away. And a man named August Van Camp, a retired grocer who lived in a farmhouse near that road, walked his dog the next morning. The dog found the trash. August Van Camp, who happened to despise litterers with a particular Flemish intensity, picked up the trash to throw it away. And among the wrappers, he found a receipt. The receipt was from a jeweler in Antwerp, and the receipt had a name on it. He called the police, not because he suspected a robbery, but because he was annoyed about the litter and he thought perhaps the police would scold the man whose name was on the receipt. The police, who had just spent the morning discovering the largest diamond robbery in the history of Europe, took the call. Inside that bag of trash, beside the receipt, beside the napkins, beside the salami crusts, was a small piece of paper covered in tiny, handwritten notes. It was a list of safe deposit box numbers. The exact safe deposit box numbers that had been opened in the Antwerp Diamond Center vault. Leonardo Notarbartolo was arrested within 48 hours. He served 10 years in a Belgian prison. He gave one interview to Wired magazine in which he claimed that the whole robbery had been an insurance fraud staged by the diamond merchants themselves. Nobody believes him. Or perhaps they do. It does not matter, because the diamonds, all $100 million of them, were never recovered. Not one stone. Not one carat. Notarbartolo went to prison. The school of Turin was never named. The diamonds vanished into the long, quiet rivers where stolen stones go to live, and they are, somewhere on this earth, on a finger, in a vault, in a private collection, smiling. Notarbartolo got caught. The diamonds got away. Read that sentence twice. That is the lesson of the first folder. The man went to prison. The prize did not. And in the strange accounting of the criminal world, that is called a win. One folder closed. 5 folders remain. The box is still open. The second folder is tied with green string. The label on the front is in Portuguese. Banco Central, Fortaleza, Agosto 2005. Inside this folder, there are no photographs of vaults. There are photographs of dirt. Fortaleza, Brazil, a coastal city. Hot, loud. The kind of place where the sea and the streets blur in the afternoon heat, and nobody walks fast, because nobody can. In the year 2005, in a quiet residential neighborhood 3 blocks from the regional headquarters of the Banco Central do Brasil, a small business opened its doors. The sign on the door said in cheerful green lettering, Grama Sintética, synthetic grass. The business sold artificial turf for gardens and small soccer fields. The owners, 2 cheerful young men, told the neighbors that they were starting out. They rented the property for 3 months. They paid in cash. They moved in equipment. The neighbors saw them coming and going at all hours, which the owners explained by saying that the synthetic grass business is, in fact, a nighttime business, because the rolls of turf are heavy, and it is best to move them when the streets are quiet. What was in fact happening, beneath the floorboards of the synthetic grass shop, was the digging of a tunnel. 78 meters long, air-conditioned, lined with wood and plastic, lit by electric bulbs strung along the ceiling at intervals of 2 meters, wide enough for a man to walk through with a sack on his back. The tunnel ran beneath the streets of Fortaleza, beneath the parking lot of the bank, and surfaced with extraordinary precision directly under the floor of the cash vault of the Banco Central do Brasil. For 3 months, the diggers worked. They moved tons of earth out of the tunnel into the synthetic grass shop and out again in the back of trucks marked with the synthetic grass logo. The earth was driven to construction sites around the city and dumped where it blended into the general churn of a tropical city in permanent expansion. Nobody noticed. Nobody investigated. A synthetic grass business was, after all, exactly the kind of business that needed to move dirt around. On the weekend of August 5th, 2005, the diggers reached the underside of the bank vault floor. They cut through the reinforced concrete. They pushed up a metal plate. They climbed into the vault. And they found, stacked on pallets in neat green and yellow bricks, the equivalent of 170 million Brazilian reais, which at the exchange rate of the day was roughly 70 million United States dollars, in cash, used bills, untraceable, unmarked. They had brought wheelbarrows. They loaded the wheelbarrows. They wheeled the cash through the tunnel. They loaded it into trucks. They drove away. The bank discovered the theft on Monday morning when an employee opened the vault door and noticed that the floor had a hole in it. The Brazilian Federal Police were called. The neighborhood was sealed. The synthetic grass shop was raided. It was empty. The tunnel was discovered. Investigators walked through it, marveling at the engineering, the air conditioning, the lighting. They estimated, based on the volume of earth moved, that the tunnel had taken at least 3 months to dig, possibly more. In the months that followed, the federal police did exactly what police are supposed to do. They identified suspects, they tracked phone records, they followed money, they arrested several men. And here is where the story turns dark, in a way that does not turn dark in the Antwerp folder. Because the men who had committed the Banco Central robbery were not, like Notarbartolo, gentlemen thieves with cologne and a wife. The men who had committed the Banco Central robbery were professionals from a Brazilian criminal world that does not respond well to police pressure. Several of the suspects, after their identities became known, were kidnapped, tortured. Some were released, some were murdered. The kidnappings were carried out, the police later concluded, by other criminals trying to extract the location of the cash. The cash, in other words, was being hunted not only by the police, but by the underworld itself. Of the $70 million stolen from the Banco Central do Brasil in August of 2005, less than 10% has ever been recovered. The rest has, in the cautious language of a federal police report from 2012, dispersed. That is the word they use, dispersed, as if the money were a cloud of insects settling slowly into the canopy of a forest, leaf by leaf by leaf, never to be gathered again. Some of the men who dug the tunnel are dead. Some are in prison for unrelated crimes. Some are still walking the streets of Fortaleza or Sao Paulo or Rio or Lisbon or Miami. The tunnel was filled in with concrete. The synthetic grass shop was demolished. The bank was repaired. The hole in the floor was closed. And somewhere, in private safes and offshore accounts and laundered businesses, the cash continues its quiet work, generation by generation, growing into the bloodstream of an economy that no longer remembers where it came from. That is the lesson of the second folder: a perfect tunnel, an imperfect aftermath. The dirt was the easy part. The silence was the hard part. And the silence, more often than not, is what keeps the money away from the courtroom. 2 folders closed. 4 folders remain. The third folder is the one I do not like to open. The string is white. The label is in English, written by a Boston detective whose handwriting has the careful pressure of a man who knows he will never solve this case. Gardner, March 18, 1990. I want to tell you about this one because it is, in many ways, the strangest of the six. Because in this case, the criminals are not the villains. The system is the villain. And the prize is still waiting on the wall. Boston, Massachusetts, the night of March 17th, 1990. St. Patrick's Day. A city of green beer and parade noise and Irish songs leaking from every doorway. In the quiet residential neighborhood called the Fenway, set back from the street behind a wrought iron fence, stands a Venetian palazzo built in the early 1900s by a fabulously wealthy widow named Isabella Stewart Gardner. The palazzo is now a museum. It contains the personal art collection of Mrs. Gardner, arranged exactly as she arranged it during her lifetime, with the strict instruction in her will that nothing be moved, nothing be sold, nothing be added, and nothing ever be loaned out. The collection includes a Vermeer, The Concert, one of only 34 Vermeers known to exist in the world. It includes a Rembrandt, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, the only seascape Rembrandt ever painted. It includes works by Manet, Degas, Govart Flinck. The collection, in 1990, was insured for approximately $500 million. Today, the estimate exceeds $1 billion. At 1:24 in the morning of March 18th, two men in Boston police uniforms approached the side door of the museum. They rang the buzzer. The night security guard, a young man named Rick Abbott, who was in his early 20s and who had been working at the museum for less than a year, looked up from his desk. The two men told Abbott through the intercom that they were responding to a disturbance call. Abbott, in violation of museum protocol, opened the door. What happened next took 81 minutes. The two men, who were not police officers, told Abbott and the second guard on duty that they were under arrest. They handcuffed both guards. They took them down to the basement. They taped them to pipes. And then, for the next 81 minutes, they walked freely through the museum, room by room, taking what they wanted and leaving what they did not. They cut the canvases out of the frames with knives. The Concert, by Vermeer, came out of its frame in strips. The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, by Rembrandt, came out of its frame in strips. They took 13 works in total, with a combined value in today's market of approximately $500 million. Some of the works they took were not the most valuable in the museum. They left a Titian. They left a Botticelli. They took, instead, a small bronze eagle finial from the top of a Napoleonic flagpole, an object that has confused investigators for 35 years because the bronze eagle is worth, on the open market, perhaps a few $1,000s. Why did they take it? Nobody knows. There are theories. There are always theories. At 3:01 in the morning, the two men walked out of the museum through the same door they had entered, carrying their 13 pieces of canvas and bronze. They got into a vehicle. They drove away. They have never been identified. Let me say that again because it is the central fact of this folder. They have never been identified. The FBI knows, more or less, who they were. The FBI has named, in subsequent press conferences, certain organized crime figures from the Boston and Hartford and Philadelphia underworlds whom the Bureau believes were involved. Some of those men are now dead. Some are in prison for other crimes. None has ever been charged with the Gardner heist, because the FBI knows, and the FBI cannot prove. The paintings have never been recovered. Not one. Not the Vermeer, not the Rembrandt, not the Manet, not the Degas, not the Bronze Eagle. Nothing. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, under the terms of Mrs. Gardner's will, cannot replace the stolen works with other paintings. The will is iron. So the museum, to this day, leaves the empty frames hanging on the wall. The exact same frames, in the exact same positions, in the exact same rooms. The Dutch room, on the second floor, has two empty frames where the Vermeer and the Rembrandt used to hang. They are staged like wounds. Visitors to the museum walk in, look at the empty frames, and feel something between grief and accusation. The frames are a memorial. They are also, in their way, an open question. They are asking the city of Boston and the world, Where are the paintings? The FBI offers a $10 million reward, with no questions asked, for the return of the works. The reward has been on the table since the year of the robbery. Nobody has claimed it. Nobody has ever come close. The 35-year statute of limitations on the theft itself has long since expired. Even if you, sitting in your living room, walked into the museum tomorrow and confessed to having stolen the paintings in 1990, you could not be prosecuted for the theft. You could be prosecuted for possession of stolen property, but only if the paintings were found in your possession. And that is the trap and the genius and the agony of this case. To return the paintings is to expose oneself to prosecution. To hold the paintings is to protect oneself from prosecution, but never to be able to enjoy them, sell them, or display them. And so, somewhere, in a basement in South Boston, or a warehouse in Hartford, or a private vault in Dublin, or a storage unit in some city we will never visit, those 13 pieces of canvas are sitting in the dark, slowly degrading, owned by a person who cannot ever show them to another human being. The Vermeer, which was painted in approximately 1664, has not been seen by a single set of eyes in 35 years. Possibly more. That is the third folder. The crime that solved itself, in a sense, because the criminals are largely known. And the crime that has never been solved, in another sense, because the prize, the actual prize, has never come home. Look at me. I want you to understand something. You are watching a video about heists. You think this is entertainment. You are smiling, perhaps, at the cleverness of these men. But there is a Vermeer in a basement somewhere, one of 34 in the world. It is rotting. The canvas is curling. The pigments, exposed to the wrong humidity, are flaking. We are losing it. We have been losing it for 35 years. And we will keep losing it until somebody, somewhere, decides that returning it is worth the risk. Or until the canvas finally dies in the dark, alone. And a piece of human achievement is erased from the world by the silence of one or two men. You watch movies about heists that fail. I open folders about heists that succeed. And here is the part of the story Hollywood will not tell you. The success of these crimes is not always a triumph. Sometimes the success is a wound that does not heal. Sometimes the prize, in winning, becomes a thing that nobody can ever truly own again. 3 folders closed, 3 folders remain. Pour yourself another. We are halfway through the box. The 4th folder is older than the others. The paper is yellowing, the string is frayed. The label is in English, in a careful clerical hand, and it reads, Bridego, August 8, 1963, The Great Train Robbery. You have heard of this one, perhaps. Most people have heard fragments. Most people have the wrong fragments. Let me give you the right ones. The night of August 7th into August 8th, 1963, Buckinghamshire, England. A small bridge in the countryside called Bridego Bridge, which crosses a quiet road. Above the bridge, the railway line from Glasgow to London. On that line, in the early hours of August 8th, the night mail train was making its scheduled run. The night mail train carried, in its second carriage, the bagged cash deposits from the Scottish banks, on their way to the Central Clearing House in London. The amount on board that night was unusually large because the run had been delayed by a bank holiday weekend and the cash had accumulated. £2.6 million. In 1963 pounds, this was a sum approaching £46 million in modern money, roughly 60 million United States dollars. 15 men stopped that train. They did it by tampering with the trackside signal. They covered the green signal with a glove. They wired a battery to the red signal to make it light up. The train driver saw the red. He stopped the train. The men, dressed in railway worker uniforms and carrying cudgels, climbed aboard. They overpowered the driver. They uncoupled the second carriage from the rest of the train. they drove the engine forward with only the cash carriage attached, half a mile down the track to where Brydego Bridge crossed the road. They stopped the engine on the bridge. They smashed the windows of the cash carriage. They formed a human chain. They passed the bags of cash, 120 bags, down the embankment to a fleet of trucks waiting on the road below. They loaded the trucks. They drove away. The whole operation took less than 30 minutes. The leader of this gang was a man named Bruce Reynolds, an antiques dealer with a taste for tailored suits and a quiet contempt for honest work. The most famous member of the gang, although he was not the leader and not even, by most accounts, particularly important to the operation, was a man named Ronnie Biggs. Ronnie Biggs was a small-time carpenter from Red Hill. Ronnie Biggs had been included in the gang because the gang needed a relief train driver, and Ronnie Biggs claimed to know one. The relief driver in the event did not know how to operate the modern diesel engine, and the gang ended up forcing the original driver to move the train at gunpoint. Ronnie Biggs's contribution to the actual robbery was, therefore, almost zero, but Ronnie Biggs is the name everyone remembers because of what came later. The gang drove the cash to a farmhouse in Buckinghamshire called Leatherslade Farm. They had bought the farm weeks before under a false name as a hideout. They divided the cash, they drank champagne, they played Monopoly with real banknotes because they thought it was funny, and in the careless joy of those 48 hours at Leatherslade Farm, they made the only mistake that mattered. They left fingerprints on the Monopoly board, on the bottles, on the doorknobs, on the kitchen sink. They had planned to burn the farm to the ground before they left, to destroy all evidence. But the man assigned to the burning lost his nerve, or got drunk, or simply forgot. He left. The farm was discovered by a neighbor. The police arrived. The fingerprints were lifted. And within months, most of the gang were under arrest. Bruce Reynolds was caught, tried, sentenced to 25 years. Most of the gang served long sentences. Ronnie Biggs was tried, convicted, sentenced to 30 years. He served 15 months. And then, in the middle of the night in 1965, he climbed over the wall of Wandsworth Prison, using a rope ladder thrown to him by an associate, dropped into a furniture truck waiting on the other side, and disappeared. For the next 36 years, Ronnie Biggs was a fugitive. He had plastic surgery in Paris. He moved to Australia. He moved to Brazil. He fathered a child with a Brazilian woman, which under Brazilian law gave him immunity from extradition. He gave interviews to British tabloids from a beach chair in Rio de Janeiro. He recorded a song with the Sex Pistols. He became, in the most extraordinary inversion of the criminal narrative, a folk hero. The British public, who in 1963 had been outraged by the Great Train Robbery, by the year 1995 had largely come to view Ronnie Biggs as a kind of beloved scoundrel. He was on television. He was in magazines. He was photographed sipping cocktails by the pool. He had won. In 2001, Ronnie Biggs, now in his 70s, ill, broke, having outlived most of his contemporaries, voluntarily returned to Britain. He returned because he wanted to die at home. He was arrested at the airport. He was sent back to prison to serve the remainder of his sentence. He was eventually released on compassionate grounds in 2009. He died in 2013 at the age of 84 in a nursing home in North London. He had spent more than half his life as a fugitive, and the British government, in the end, simply gave up. The £2.6 million was never substantially recovered. A small portion was found at Leatherslade Farm. Another small portion was traced through banknote serial numbers in the months following the robbery. But the bulk of the money, more than £2 million in 1963 currency, was never recovered. It was spent, it was hidden, it was buried. It was passed to families. It was used to start businesses, to buy houses, to send children to school. It dissolved into the British economy of the 1960s and 70s and was never seen again as a single sum. The lesson of the fourth folder is the lesson of time. The men were caught. The money was not. And in the long arithmetic of a human life, in the quiet evening of a bar in Rio, with the sound of waves outside, the catching of the man does not always undo the spending of the money. Ronnie Biggs lived to be 84. He saw his grandchildren. He drank his coffee in the morning. He watched the sun set over the Atlantic. The state took back his body, in the end. The state never took back the money. And the man, by his own account, until the very last weeks of his life, had no regrets. That is the fourth folder. 4 folders closed. 2 folders remain. The 5th folder is the largest. The string is red, the kind of bright red string that someone uses to mark something they want to find again in a hurry. The label reads, Tunbridge, February 22, 2006. The Securitas Depot robbery, the largest cash robbery in the history of the United Kingdom. Tunbridge, Kent. A small town in southeastern England. The kind of town where nothing ever happens and nobody ever expects anything to happen. On the outskirts of Tunbridge, in a low industrial building behind a perimeter fence, stood the Securitas Cash Management Depot. This depot was one of the central distribution points for cash in the southeastern United Kingdom. Every night, the depot held an enormous quantity of physical banknotes en route from the Bank of England to the high street banks and the cash machines of the region. On a typical night, the depot held perhaps 15 to 20 million pounds. On the night of February 21st into February 22nd, 2006, due to a scheduling overlap, the depot held 53 million pounds. Somebody, somewhere, knew that. At 6:30 on the evening of February 21st, the manager of the Securitas Depot, a man named Colin Dixon, was driving home from work in his Nissan Almera. He was followed. He was pulled over by what appeared to be an unmarked police car. 2 men in police uniforms got out. They told him he was being arrested. They put him in their car. They drove him to a remote farmhouse. Meanwhile, simultaneously, a second team of men, also dressed as police officers, arrived at the home of Colin Dixon's wife. They told her that her husband had been in a serious accident. They told her she needed to come with them. They put her and her young son into a van. They drove them also to the same remote farmhouse. There, inside the farmhouse, the entire Dixon family was held at gunpoint. Colin Dixon was told that if he did not cooperate fully, his wife and child would be killed. At 1 a.m, Colin Dixon, with his hostage family in the minds of his captors, walked into the Securitas Depot with the gang. He used his keys. He used his codes. He told the night staff that he was conducting a surprise audit. The staff, who knew Mr. Dixon, did not question him. The gang then took the entire night staff hostage. 14 people in total, and locked them in metal cages inside the depot. The cages were ordinarily used to transport cash. That night, they were used to transport human beings, frightened and silent, into the back rooms of their own workplace. For the next hour, the gang loaded 53 million pounds in used banknotes into the back of a 7.5-ton truck. 53 million pounds. In cash. In bags. The bags were so heavy that some of them had to be dragged across the depot floor. The gang worked methodically. They did not hurry. They could afford not to hurry because they had taken the staff. They had taken the manager. They had taken the manager's family. And the police, in those quiet early morning hours, did not yet know that any of this was happening. At 3 a.m, the truck drove out of the gates of the Securitas Depot and disappeared into the lanes of Kent. The gang left behind, locked in their cages, the staff. They left behind in the back room the Dixon family, alive and uninjured. And they left behind, scattered across the depot, the evidence that would, within weeks, begin to undo them. Because here is the truth about the Securitas robbery. The plan was brilliant. The execution was brilliant. The criminals were not. They were a mixed group of professional armed robbers and amateur hangers-on, recruited at the last minute, paid in cash, sent home with bags of money and no instructions on how to handle that money. Within days of the robbery, members of the gang began making mistakes that would have embarrassed a teenager. One man tried to deposit large quantities of cash at his local branch, in person, in the same town where the robbery had occurred. One man bought a Mercedes with a duffel bag of 50-pound notes. One man stored £2 million in a rented garage and forgot to pay the rent on the garage. One man left a balaclava with his DNA on it inside the depot. The arrests began within 10 days. Over the following 2 years, the police identified and prosecuted the majority of the gang. Several men received long prison sentences. The mastermind, a man named Lee Murray, fled to Morocco, where, conveniently for him, no extradition treaty existed with the United Kingdom. Murray lived openly in Morocco for several years until he was eventually arrested by Moroccan authorities on unrelated charges and sentenced in a Moroccan court to 25 years in a Moroccan prison. He is still there. He has never been extradited to face British charges. Of the £53 million, approximately $21 million was eventually recovered by police in fragments over the course of the investigation. Recovered from garages, recovered from suitcases under beds, recovered from a hotel safe in Marrakesh, recovered in one strange instance from a hole dug in a paddock behind a horse stable. Approximately £32 million was never recovered. That money, in the language of the British police investigation, remains outstanding. Outstanding, like a library book. Outstanding. As if the money is going to be returned, eventually, with a polite apology and a small fine for being late. The lesson of the fifth folder is the lesson of paradox, the crime of the century, executed by men who were not, by any reasonable measure, criminals of the century. The plan was a clockwork mechanism. The men who executed it were, most of them, fundamentally unsuited to handling the consequences. They were caught because they could not stop spending. They were caught because they could not stop talking. They were caught because they were not, in the end, professionals. The professionals, the few professionals among them, the men who knew how to vanish, vanished. They are vanished still, and so is most of the money. 5 folders closed. 1 folder remains. The 6th folder is thin, the thinnest in the box. There is almost nothing in it because there is almost nothing to put in it. The string is black. The label is in Dutch. Schiphol, February 25, 2005. Schiphol Airport, Amsterdam. The largest airport in the Netherlands. One of the busiest cargo hubs in Europe. On the morning of February 25, 2005, at approximately 10:30 in the morning, in broad daylight, on the cargo apron behind the passenger terminals, a KLM cargo truck pulled up to a holding warehouse. This was not unusual. KLM cargo trucks pulled up to that warehouse hundreds of times a day. The truck was the correct color. The truck had the correct logos. The 2 men inside the truck wore KLM uniforms. They had KLM identification badges. The badges, when scanned by the warehouse security system, came back valid. The men were known to the staff. They had been seen before. They were waved through. The men got out of the truck. They walked into the warehouse. They walked to the section of the warehouse where, that morning, a shipment of polished diamonds was waiting to be loaded onto an outgoing flight to Antwerp. The shipment was worth approximately 75 million euros. The shipment had arrived at the airport 90 minutes earlier. It had been processed, scanned, and placed into a secure holding zone, where it was due to be loaded onto a flight in approximately 1 hour. The 2 men in KLM uniforms walked up to that secure holding zone. They produced documentation. They produced manifest numbers. They produced authorization codes. The codes were valid. The numbers were valid. The documentation was valid. They loaded the diamonds onto a forklift. They drove the forklift back to their truck. They loaded the diamonds into the truck. They got into the truck. They drove out of the cargo apron. They drove out of the airport. They turned onto the A4 highway. They disappeared. The robbery took, from start to finish, approximately 10 minutes. By the time KLM realized what had happened, by the time the actual diamond shipment was discovered missing from the holding zone, the truck was already on the highway, and the men inside it were already shedding their uniforms. The truck itself was found, abandoned, in a field outside Amsterdam 3 days later. The diamonds, the men, and the credentials they had used were never seen again. Let me say what is in this folder. The folder contains a list of theories. The folder contains a list of suspects. The folder contains the Dutch police's belief, supported by the testimony of multiple insiders, that the robbery was an inside job. That somebody, or several somebodies, working inside the airport's cargo system, provided the credentials, provided the schedule, provided the manifest numbers. That this was not, technically, a heist. This was a logistics operation, an act of supply chain manipulation. The diamonds did not, in any meaningful sense, leave the system through force. They left the system through the proper channels, with all the proper paperwork, escorted by men who had every appearance of authority. The system did exactly what it was designed to do. It moved a valid shipment with valid documentation to a valid destination. The destination just happened to be wrong. No arrests have ever been made. No diamonds have ever been recovered. No suspects have ever been formally charged. The Dutch police know who they think did it. They have never been able to prove it. The investigation is technically still open, 20 years on, and every year the file grows thinner, the witnesses move farther away, the leads grow colder, and the possibility of a successful prosecution drifts further from any practical horizon. 75 million euros in polished diamonds. Walked through the front door of Schiphol Airport, with the consent of the airport, in 10 minutes, in broad daylight. That is the sixth folder. The most successful crime in this box by every measurable metric. No arrests, no charges, no recovery, no identifications. A small piece of paper in a thin folder on which a Dutch detective has written in resigned blue ink the words, "Suspected internal collaboration. No admissible evidence." That is the sixth folder. That is the last folder. The box is almost closed. So here we are. The wooden box on my desk is empty now. 6 folders, 6 robberies. Roughly $400 million in combined losses in the conservative estimate. Possibly twice that in the realistic estimate. Diamonds, cash, paintings, gold. Stolen from vaults that were called impregnable, from museums that were called secure, from trains that were called unrobbable, from airports that were called incorruptible. And in every single case, the same final note, the same quiet word at the bottom of the file: outstanding, unrecovered, unsolved. You watch movies about heists. You enjoy them. You should enjoy them. They are well made, they have music, they have movement, they have a satisfying ending in which the criminals are caught and the wrong is undone. I am not telling you to stop watching them. I am telling you to understand what those movies are. They are wishes. They are fantasies. They are the way we tell ourselves that the world is fundamentally just, that the police can be trusted to recover what is taken, that the courts can be trusted to convict what is known. The truth is in this box. The truth is that the perfect crime is not the crime that vanishes. The perfect crime is the crime that does not vanish at all. The perfect crime sits in plain sight. The criminal is identified. The witnesses speak. The investigators investigate. And nothing happens. Nothing can happen. Because between knowing and proving lies a wall. And on one side of that wall stand the police. And on the other side stands a man with the prize. And the wall is made of the careful, exhausting language of legal procedure. And that wall has held for 35 years, for 20 years, for 60 years, and counting. Some of the men in these folders are dead, some are old, some are still working. The diamonds from Antwerp are on fingers. The cash from Fortaleza is in businesses. The paintings from Boston are in basements. The pounds from the train robbery are in family homes, 3 generations deep. The cash from Tunbridge is in offshore accounts. The stones from Schiphol are in private collections, owned by men who paid in cash and asked no questions. None of it is coming back. None of it is ever coming back. I want you to remember something. The next time you walk past a museum, or a bank, or a jeweler's window, the systems that protect those things are good. They are very good. They are designed by intelligent people who know exactly what they are doing. But the systems that protect those things are not perfect. They have one weakness, the same weakness, and it is the same weakness that every system in human history has had. They depend on the truthfulness of the people who use them. The Antwerp vault failed because Notarbartolo rented an office in the building. The Banco Central vault failed because nobody investigated a synthetic grass shop. The Gardner Museum failed because a young guard opened the door. The Glasgow mail train failed because a railway signal was tampered with by a man in a railway uniform. The Securitas depot failed because a manager opened it with his own key. The Schiphol cargo system failed because a credential, signed by the airport itself, said that the diamonds belonged to the men in the truck. In every single case, the system was not broken from the outside. The system was given permission by an insider to do exactly what it was designed to do. And it did. That is the lesson. That is the only lesson in this box that matters. The locks do not fail. The people fail. I am going to close the box now. Before I do, I want to give you something. Here, take this. It is a diamond. Look at it. Hold it up to the light. See the way it catches the lamp. See the way the facets break the room into 100 pieces. It is beautiful. It is, by any visual standard, a perfect stone. It is, of course, fake, cubic zirconia. €3 at a market in Brussels. I bought 10 of them. I keep them in a drawer. But here's the thing. If you walked out of this room with this stone in your pocket, and somebody stopped you in the hallway, and they said, "Sir, did you take that?" you would say, "No," and they could not prove you had. Because there is nothing on this stone, no marker, no serial number, no chain of custody, that proves it is mine. Even if I told the police, even if I called them right now and told them, "That man took my diamond," they would come to your door, they would knock, they would ask you politely, "Did you take it?" And you would say no, and they would leave. And you would have it, and nothing in the world would compel you to give it back. The diamond, by the simple act of being in your pocket and not in mine, would belong to you. Not legally, not morally, but practically, functionally, in the way that matters. Now imagine that diamond is real. Imagine it is from Antwerp. Imagine it is $100 million. Imagine the man who took it from the vault has spent the last 20 years of his life walking through hallways exactly like this one, with exactly that diamond in his pocket. And every time somebody has stopped him and asked, "Sir, did you take that?" he has smiled and he has said, "No." And they have not been able to prove that he did. That is the box. That is the lesson. Welcome to the side that wins. I will see you next week. The archive has more folders than this one. Some of them are older, some of them are stranger. Some of them are about people who did not steal money at all, but who stole instead time, or memory, or the thing that is more valuable than either of those, which I will not name here because it is a long story and it deserves its own folder, and we have already spent ourselves on this one. Take the diamond. It is yours now. There is nothing I can do to prove that you took it. That is the curse of the archive. That is also, in its way, the gift of the archive. They are the same thing. They have always been the same thing. Good night.